Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another Pinball and the Movie presentation. Today, we're going to be talking about the Street Fighter film from 1994, and we'll briefly discuss the pinball table. So, this feature will be a little different. I'm just going to talk about the movie and give you my thoughts and share with you some interesting facts. And there will be no pinball portion, it'll just be playing in the background, and I'll talk a little bit about it. Just to try, I want to try something new. And so we'll see how it works, right? But a lot of you guys were saying that, the slides, the PowerPoint slides, were not it. So I just want to try something else. So let's talk about this movie. This movie came out in 1994 and was directed by a man named Steven De Souza. I don't know a lot about him. I'm not really sure what other movies he's directed. Um, but when I was reading the Wikipedia page, he was a fan of the Street Fighter franchise. And so that's pretty cool to me when you have a director directing a movie based on something that he's also a fan of, right? And it makes sense. I mean, sure, you can hire directors that might be good, that might have a lot of credibility, but if they're not fans of the source material, um, you know, can they really be trusted as good directors? But I think on the flip side, sometimes if you're too much of a fan, it could get in the way of the movie. Sometimes maybe it's better to have a little bit of a separation there, a little bit of a balance. But that's for another day, right? And so this movie, when it released in December of 1994, it followed the Street Fighter II, the animated movie, which I have not seen, but I've heard about it, and I've seen like commercials for it on YouTube and such. And something that I was actually pretty surprised to read about and learn about was this movie was actually a huge commercial success. In the box office, it made three times the amount that was needed to produce the movie, the production cost. And so a lot of this movie was financed by Capcom, which makes sense because, Capcom is the developer of the Street Fighter series. And you have to remember, too, at around this time, Street Fighter 2 was huge in arcades. It's probably one of the most popular arcade games in history, aside from, uh, you know, the earlier ones like Pac-Man and Galaga and whatnot, right? Um, so it really was something huge, and I grew up loving Street Fighter 2. I think it was one of the first games that I really enjoyed playing on my Sega. I played it on Super Nintendo, but the cover of Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition is so iconic. It really, ever since playing Street Fighter as a kid, I think it'll always be a part of my life. Street Fighter, because I went on to play other Street Fighter games and enjoyed them as well, like Street Fighter Third Strike, Marvel vs. Capcom, and there's been a lot of Street Fighter games. So it's a huge franchise overall. Um, and there's something that I think is really unique about these type of movies. First, let me just say that this pinball table from Gottlieb released a year before the movie, and it's not based on the movie. So it is sort of a stretch, but not really. I mean, they're both based on Street Fighter, the world of Street Fighter. But I think this table from Gottlieb is more based on the actual video game, uh, and it actually ties in so much with the video game that on the flyer for this pinball table, they show an arcade cabinet with your regular fighting sticks of the Street Fighter, arcade game Champion Edition. So they're kind of advertising and saying, hey, if you're gonna have the coin operated Street Fighter Champion Edition, why not also have the Street Fighter 2 pinball machine and pair it, right? So they're kind of trying to use it as a selling point. Um, but Street Fighter is huge. This was also, um, aside from this movie being a huge box office success, it was also Raul Julia's final theatrical performance before he passed away. And he passed away 2 months before the release of the movie. And when they were starting to cast for the characters, Raul Julia said he wanted to take his role as M Bison because his children were fans of the video game, and I thought that was really cool. Filming was also a little difficult because they weren't sure how long Raul Julia, when they found out that he had cancer, they weren't sure how long filming would take. So they some scenes were done in kind of reverse. But one thing that's really cool, that I want to note is that uh, this film was dedicated to him at the end, and there's what they call like a post-credit scene where at the very end, past the end credits, after they roll, you see a fist come up in the air, which is M Bison, to kind of like pay tribute to Raul Julia for his really awesome performance as M Bison in his final one. So that's really cool to find out. Of course, you had Jean Claude Van Damme and Kyle Minogue playing Cammy, which I was like, she looks familiar. And then I was like, oh yeah, that's Kyle Minogue, right? I saw your name. Um, just looking here. So this movie actually still, you know, still makes a lot of money for Capcom through its home video releases, streaming. So it's kind of cool in that way. And the thing I wanted to mention was you have to remember video game live action movies were still relatively new. You had movies like the Mortal Kombat franchise. And so it was something that was not really done too much. And I think it was kind of like, risky. So, I think they were talking in the article on Wikipedia how the Super Mario Brothers movie didn't do that well. But you just got to think and remember that video game movies were very new at the time. But I just remember them being so cool, like because movie going to the movies and going to the arcades were so connected, and so when you're a fan of a video game like Street Fighter, and then you see a movie, it's like the coolest thing in the world as a kid, right? Um, and so there was most of the filming was in Queensland, Australia. They did some filming in Thailand, um, and something that I thought was really cool too was there was a coin operated game based on the actual movie called Street Fighter the movie video game, and there was a version for the Sega Saturn and PlayStation, which looks pretty cool. And there's also, when we're talking about legacy, there was a 2009 video um, movie called Street Fighter: The Legend of Chun Li, which apparently did really bad. But in 2014, there was like a mini series that came out that was received really well called Street Fighter Assassin's Fist. That was a television series and also a movie format on YouTube that was focusing on Ryu and Ken's training under Guggen. But most recently, as of April 2023, there's talk about another Street Fighter movie that's going to release in 2026 by Sony. So, but if we step back a bit, a sequel was planned back in 2003, a Street Fighter 2 sequel that was supposed to have Van Damme return, Dolph Lundgren, but the project never materialized. So that's unfortunate. But as I watched this movie, I couldn't help but think, what if what if Van Damme returned? But he's really old now, right? So when I watched this movie today, I thought it was a good movie. I think a lot of people give it, a lot of critics kind of view it as a failure. It's just they think it's just kind of cheesy one-liners, campy. But I thought the movie did okay. I wouldn't have chosen Van Damme for Guile. I don't think Guile is one of my favorite characters, but I don't think he looked like the Guile that you see in the Street Fighter game. His hair wasn't that like, that fro, that blonde fro. He has the muscles for Guile, but I just feel like they should have chose someone. If they kept with Van Damme, his hair should have been more like Guile. But the other casting of characters in the film was pretty good in my opinion. You saw E Honda, you saw Balrog, Chun Li, Vega, Sagat, Ken, Ryu. I think the wardrobe for those characters were done really well. Cammy as well. Can't forget Zangief. But I think one of the coolest things about this movie was the story about Charlie and Blanca, how Blanca, came to be this like creature, which was what this movie is kind of based on, where M Bison is creating these super soldiers to dominate the world. So the only thing I would say is I felt like this movie could have really been executed a lot better. I feel like they could have taken that sequence of Blanc a lot further. This movie was campy, of course, and funny as well. But I felt like if it was done serious, if it was more of like a serious tone, and because Raul Julia was really acting his heart and soul out in this film, and I just feel like the other actors didn't really match his energy. So I felt like it could have been done better, but I think it's a great one to see. Um, and so this table from Gottlieb is also really fun to play. I'd love to play it in real life. One of the coolest things about this table is that underneath there's a toy car that you can hit, which is much like the video game in that bonus mode where you're trying to break the car. So really cool table from Gottlieb based on this movie. And I hope you enjoyed this Pinball and Future movie. Let me know if you've seen the movie. Let me know what you think about the table. And we'll talk again next time. Take care.